Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Thumbcast. I'm Drew, your host, and I'm joined with my co-host, Xander.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So, I hope you guys have been enjoying this podcast so far. I know I have. We've been taking on some, very current topics of news in terms of Nintendo mainly. But we thought we'd kind of take a step back in time. Xander, do you want to just kick off what our topic is of the day, what we're going to be talking about?
So today we're going to be talking about Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Both two very big Nintendo 64 games and highly regarded even to this day. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, and I thought it was good to talk about that because, these are games that, at least for myself, when I was growing up, the N64 was pretty much, I had played the Super Nintendo and even the Nintendo actually, but N64 was kind of the console that I did most of my gaming on in my early childhood. And these two games were kind of the pillars of that console. Still to this day. And I think the reason why we're talking about it is because these games are still talked about today.
Right.
People compare to these games. So, yeah, you want to get us started?
Right. So I grew up with an N64 alongside an NES. The N64 belonged to my dad, so I was introduced to 3D games at the same time as 2D. But I never had Ocarina of Time growing up. I only had Mario 64 and then some other games. But that was by far the biggest one that we owned, and it was kind of the my go-to, I suppose. I think it's the only one I actually beat. So I'm very nostalgic towards it, whereas Ocarina of Time I'm not as much. The first time I really played through that game was when it was made for the 3DS. But outside of that, my experience with it is the Super Smash Bros. Melee demo. I think it was Melee. It might have been Brawl that had that. But I suppose I'm nostalgic for like the Kokiri Forests chapter. But after like that 5 minutes is up, the demo ended, and so I was kicked out of it. But yeah, I really liked that game a lot. For like the 5 minutes I got to play, and then when I played through the whole thing, I remember liking it in high school. But as I have tried playing it again recently, it has not been something I've enjoyed playing. So.
It's not held up.
No, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about it recently because a lot of people love that game and it's one of their favorites. And they call it a masterpiece, and I don't know. I have problems with that word, but I understand it because in my eyes, like Mario 64 is still a masterpiece because I can still go back to it whenever I want to and still play it and have a great time. And I know it really well, whereas one of my friends who tried playing it for the first time recently, he enjoyed it because I played it with him, or alongside him, I suppose, but he did not, I guess, like controlling Mario. He thought it had not aged well, and so he struggled to call it a masterpiece, understand why it like lived up to the hype of what everyone had been talking about it. So, I don't know, that's been something I've been thinking about a lot recently.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's kind of like, and I wonder how popular we will be after this episode of people hearing this, because I think we are treading into some deep waters here.
Yeah, I'm
with
sure.
This topic, but I
dislikes.
think it's important. I think, people, I don't know. I feel like people fall into people who say that these games are masterpieces might fall into two camps where people think that, oh yeah, that game is so popular, that game changed gaming. You always see it in, when people do like a countdown of like 100 best games or 10 best games, you might see one of these in that list at near the top. And I feel like those people who regard these games as masterpieces either haven't played these games in a long time, or they only play these games. You know what I mean? Like they go back because, or they like to live in the old days and like, oh, this is when games were good. My personal feeling about it is that these games were a huge leap, like a stepping stone to where we are today, going to be, like the first 3D console, if you will, or whatever, 3D platforming or 3D, adventure style kind of games. But you're right. You pick them up, they don't really control well. And I think that I myself played Mario 64 a few months ago, actually, and of course I didn't whip out my N64. I did a virtual console on my Wii U, and I was playing through Mario 64, and I got probably, I don't know, like 75% of the way through it. I was just like, I had a weekend, I wasn't doing anything, and I found myself just so frustrated with not only the controls actually, but just the level design and getting Mario from point A to point B just seemed to be really difficult for me. And I've since played through a few other 3D Mario titles and haven't had that much trouble. So for me, like, I can definitely understand how your friend was getting frustrated with it. But that said, I do agree that Super Mario 64 is one of the greatest games because it's first of all, you pop that copy in and you just hear that that opening title. You see the opening title and it just brings you back nostalgia wise. But like, it had a great concept. It's one of those games that was just, it opened your eyes, I guess, to what the future could be, I guess. And like, so yeah, I mean, I guess we're just talking about Mario 64 first, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah, I do have a little bit. I mean, I actually probably haven't played this game as much as you have,
sure.
Honestly, but it's one of those games that I remember, and I'll say this again when we jump over to Ocarina. I think people who grew up with the game, like for me, it was me and a friend or me and my brother sitting down with this game and like, taking turns. And it was one of those games that you have fun experiencing it because you're experiencing it with someone else. But like, I feel like today, people who pick these games up for the first time are playing alone. Mm-hmm. And that experience might, I think it's different because people are like more judgmental these days and expect a lot more these days. But that's just me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that mentality too. I never grew up with a Super Nintendo, so when the Super Nintendo came out and they also had the Super Nintendo games come to the new 3DS, I was able to play a lot of those games for the first time, and I did not really care for Super Mario World or A Link to the Past, which I know are like two of the three trifecta of Super Nintendo games.
Oh yeah.
So it's super controversial, and I understand that, but that's my story. I didn't really enjoy those, but I also understand the mentality of I grew up with this game and I played it a lot, so I understand it and I am nostalgic towards it, and I still find fun in it. So I hold it in a higher regard, like I do with Super Mario 64. That said, though, it and Ocarina of Time, I think are really hard games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I don't think is well designed. Like some of the stars that are hidden are. I don't understand how a child would be able to figure this out. I don't understand how I found it out. I remember one in the is it Womp's Fortress, which is the floating one in the first area of the castle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a star where you have to get in the cannon and shoot a wall. And I remember as a kid being like, what wall? And I got in that cannon and I blasted every possible wall for, I think, hours. And then I'll spur of the moment, got lucky and I hit the right like tip at the right time, and I got a star. And there were some stars that I was able to get to that I didn't understand how to get to. I like that same level. There's one that's in a cage that's floating up in the sky, and the way you're supposed to get it is
you're talking about.
you do know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's one that's in that cage, and I think the way it's designed is you have to get to that tree and find an owl, even though there's no other owl that I can remember. There might be one on Tall Mountain, but there's no other owl that I can remember. And you have to climb on top of it or hang from it and then have it drop you into the cage. Well, as a kid, I did not know about the owl, so I thought, oh, well, the best way to get up there is to use the cannon. So I would basically do trial and error trying to find the correct arc to shoot Mario up into the sky and have him land into that cage. And that took me hours to figure out how to do.
Of course, it takes a long time
Right.
to redo that. And yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah, and Ocarina of Time is the same way. There's a lot of stuff that is just not explained, like getting into the Jabu Jabu Belly dungeon. You have to put that fish in front of him. Like, there's no indicator whatsoever to do that. Or after you leave the Kokiri Forest and you go to the what is it? The Hyrule Castle to talk to Zelda, and then she kind of points you in the next direction, which is Death Mountain. You also have to go back to Kokiri Forest, even though you just said goodbye to Sario, just so you could get her song. I don't really understand how you would know to do that, or why you would know to do that. There's a lot of stuff in them that I don't find fun. I think that them as the names of the games and the look of them are nostalgic and fun to look at, but I don't like playing them as much as I think a lot of people think that they do. And that's not to say I'm here to take down their throne. I respect them. I've almost been thinking about calling them masterpieces of their time rather than of today, because there are a lot better games that I've played that are probably not even as good by today's standards that I think still beat out those two. So
I totally respect that. I think I played Ocarina of Time a whole lot, and it's one of those games that, like you said, you have to almost just already know what to do.
Yeah.
And and there's no direction. It's literally just you have to explore and stumble upon things, and then kind of put it in order. And so I remember playing this game, and when I was a kid and getting stuck, basically after Link became an adult, I had no clue what to do next.
Right.
And I actually had a used copy of the game, and of course all the save data is on the cartridge, and the person who had it before me, Dustin was his name, by the way.
Okay, cool.
Had already beaten the game, and so anytime I just gave up, I would go to his file and just fight Ganon and beat the game. So it was one of those things that's well, I haven't really beat the game, but I beat the game.
Right.
And I didn't revisit Ocarina for a long time until I got really kind of into college and got really serious about gaming again. And when I did that, it was okay, I need to beat Ocarina of Time, and it was, I couldn't do it without looking things up online. And that is poor game design. And it's not, I understand that I think, if you look at the games prior to this, you had, the original, game where it was basically just complete 100% exploration. It didn't really tell you what to do at all. So Zelda, I think, does have a pattern of doing that, but Ocarina of Time is really a game that I think, even though it's on a Nintendo platform and a lot of kids played it, it was almost made for adults, who actually could think and solve puzzles and figure things out. So it's funny because I was always on the side that people were Ocarina of Time is the greatest Zelda and one of the greatest games of all time, and I agree that it was a great game. I've beaten it now, I think 3 or 4 times, but it's I never put it up there on the top of my Zelda list because I just didn't think the story was kind of simple, I guess. Not simple, I mean there was it just, the way it was barely touched on, and then it just was broken up into pieces, and it was nothing compared to the storytelling that I was used to from something like Twilight Princess, for instance, or something like that. So on that level, I mean, I don't know. I didn't regard it as one. I don't know. I just always have felt animosity toward Ocarina of Time, I guess. And the same can be said about Majora's Mask. I think that's even less direct in terms of what you're supposed to do. And I remember being very frustrated with that experience as well. But but now that I know what to do, it's like, oh, sure, I can do it now. And I remember there was one summer, it was like right after I got married, and I sat Jamie down and I was like, we should play some Zelda. And mainly she just wanted to watch. So she actually, and I know I picked the right woman, by the way, because she likes to watch me playing video games.
You're lucky, man.
But she watched me play through pretty much all the main console Zelda games. Mm-hmm. And I asked her at the end of it, after we played through all of them, I was like, which one's your favorite? And she said, Ocarina of Time. And I'm like, okay, tell me why. And she's like, I don't know, I like how you're a kid and then you're an adult and you have to it's time travel. And I was like, okay, yeah. She liked seeing Hyrule Castle, and all of that. And I think, had I struggled more, she probably would have been like, this is boring. But I, at that time, knew what to do, so I played through it. Except the water dungeon. Oh, man. Had to look that one up again. But, so yeah, I mean, it's all about when people experience it, I think, and how they experience it. But for me, it's not a very good experience because it's not really clear in terms of the design of the game, what needs to be done, I guess.
Right, and when you say it like that, it's almost as if once you know what to do and you play Ocarina of Time, it's more fun to play it when you know where to go. But by that point, it's not really a video game. It's more of just a tour, like an interactive tour, almost like a Telltale game if you know what you're doing, which is a bit of a jump, I know, but yeah, I don't.
No, it's not.
I don't know. My friend who beat Mario 64, he went ahead and played Mario Odyssey afterwards and thought it was a lot more fun. And then he genuinely said, yeah, I'm glad I played Mario 64, but Mario Odyssey was the first Nintendo game I've really enjoyed playing. So then we switched to, I had him pick what he wanted to play next, and he asked to play Ocarina of Time because even though he's been an Xbox person his whole life, he's never owned a Nintendo console. He knew that there was a lot of hype around that game, and so he wanted to see what it was all about. And it was a struggle. We got all the way to the Forest Temple, and then he bailed. He was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not fun. And it was actually because of the combat. I mean, the exploration aspect of alone, he didn't struggle with because I didn't let him struggle. I had a guide out the entire time because I knew we were not going to get anywhere if we didn't have one. And I wouldn't just say, okay, go left, go right. I would have him kind of point in the right direction, or I would point in the right direction once he kind of got stuck. But I don't know. It wasn't a very fun experience. But there was a part in the Forest Temple where you have to fight two of I think they're the Stalfos, and you have to kill them quick enough so that way they don't respawn. Because if you knock one out, then the other one you have to destroy before its buddy it gets fixed. And we couldn't do it, and so I couldn't either. And we were playing it on the N64. So at that point, I was like, all right, you know what? Let's just bail on this. And when people switched to Breath of the Wild instead. And his favorite game is Skyrim, and he was much more attracted to Breath of the Wild in that manner. But he also commented on the story. He was like, this is really dumb and goofy. It's almost like a tropey kids fantasy because...
on which one? Ocarina? Or
yeah, Ocarina. He was like, it was during the scene where Link and Zelda are both kids and they're talking in that courtyard. And he's like, so basically, because they both had a dream and now they're seeing the same guy that was in their dream, they think he's bad and that they have to go get the Triforce, which is this world's entity of a god, and stop him.
A huge leap, yeah.
And he's like, that's like a kid's fantasy. This isn't a story. And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right. And he's like, are they all like this? And I was like, not really, but to an extent, they are very similar plot lines throughout all of them. I mean, Zelda, it's weird because Nintendo kind of markets the story of Zelda more than I think they should, because it's not as really relevant as compared to like what they do with like what the game is. So
Sure.
I don't know. It's weird. But again, Mario 64 is the same way. I mean, the very first level is the Bob on battlefield, and you have to climb to the very top, and you have to face down with King Bob-omb. And I don't know how you're supposed to know to run around him and pick him up and then throw him. I don't. That's just not a very clear sign to me. But again, I know that because
Mm-hmm.
I played it before, and so it makes sense to do it right away. So I don't know. It's kind of goofy. I guess you would think to do that because you can do that with all the other bombs, but yeah,
So th-
it's weird.
so this is something about Mario 64 that and if anyone has watched me play a 3D Mario game on the channel, I always when I die, when I fall off an edge, I'm always yelling out depth perception. And it's because of I've been scarred from Mario 64, which I did not understand the camera and why the camera was always in the wrong place. Like when you get to a part of a level where the camera decides that it needs to be on the side or at an angle, like why couldn't it have just been behind me the whole time? I second guess myself where I'm leaping and where I'm jumping, and I always fall, especially on the Bowser levels. Like I don't know. I can't do it. And
Right.
it's so it's something that like my depth perception of where Mario is in a 3D platform is always wrong. So like there's a few times even in Odyssey where that would happen to me, and it's just like I don't know. I guess I've never gotten used to it. And it was I remember my brain hurting when I was playing through Galaxy. I was like really confused as to where gravity was and where and how I interacted with it. So I don't know. I guess I think it might be one of those things that if I had really dedicated the time to 3D Mario, it's just always a breath of fresh air when I can pick up a 2D Mario game. And I think I've said that before on here that like I much prefer side-scrolling Mario because it just feels better to me. Now, Mario Odyssey, I still had a great experience with. I thought Mario controlled the best he's ever controlled. And then when it's funny because when you go back to 64, it just feels like the joystick, the joystick is a part of the problem, especially if you're playing it on the N64 controller because it's not smooth. It doesn't have any spring. It kind of stays where you put it, and that always tripped me up too. So Mario 64 has never felt good playing it, so I think that's a big reason why I haven't played it much. But
Right. So again, I don't want to be too negative on either of those games because I understand a lot of people like them, and I do think they are good games. Just once you know what you're doing, and I think that you can have a lot of fun playing them. I do still get a lot of fun going back to Mario 64, and I love the music. I love what it's done for the series, and I really liked how they explored a new type of game with Mario rather than just running from left to right to get to the flagpole. They made a world that Mario could jump around in and explore, and they wanted to experiment with what they could do with this character that's just known for being very versatile. So that was very well done,
yeah,
and I know a lot of
when
people
people
say that.
talk about, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say that a lot of people say that A Link to the Past is the predecessor to Ocarina of Time, and Ocarina of Time is really just the same game but in 3D, and there are definitely a lot of comparisons to be made there.
Yeah, I think when people like, especially, like you were saying, I have tons of fun with these games still, especially Ocarina of Time. I can go back and play that game now and just enjoy it for what it is. But knowing what I'm doing is a big part of that. I think that these are both good games, really good games. Especially, I mean, probably some of the best, obviously, on that console. And I think that people who still regard them as the greatest games ever made, I think are personally mistaken. But I don't want to speak any more against these games because I do think they are good. I think especially it's a testament to Mario 64, when people were saying that, Odyssey was the true sequel to that game or something because none of the other 3D Marios compared to Super Mario 64 just being a solid game. and I think that's a testament to it. People, I think, it's been interesting to see how the Zelda series has grown because, it was very much just a game that encouraged you to explore. And I think, then we got more 3D Zelda games, and they were very, I don't want to say like you were on rails or anything, but it did very much lead you to the next thing, and then obviously that was all blown out again by Breath of the Wild, which this is not about Breath of the Wild, but that game did kind of go back to its roots in terms of exploration, but it did it in a way that you could actually understand what to do, I guess, in a way.
Right.
It didn't have the same pitfalls that Ocarina of Time had.
People will definitely be more compelled now to play through Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild because they're great games in that they appease the fans of the Nintendo community, but they also are easy to pick up and play, even if you're brand new to them.
Absolutely.
There's not really like a set standard of, you have to know how to do this because if you play this one, and whereas it's very relevant in particularly in the Zelda games. So
I have a friend who doesn't own a Nintendo console. I had him play Breath of the Wild, and he enjoyed the experience so much that he wanted to go through a lot of the Zelda games basically. And he's like, which one should I play? And I said, well, I kind of gave him the rundown of at least the main console ones. I didn't go deep into like Link to the Past or or Minish Cap or any of that because that's other hardware. But like I said, if you play through these main console ones, they're not Breath of the Wild. They're different, and especially if you start with Ocarina of Time, it's a very different game. It's not even like it doesn't. I'm not talking about a different story. It's a different game. It's a completely different game.
And I think that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, especially, maybe less. It's been a while since I played Skyward Sword, but I do associate Twilight Princess and Wind Waker to be very similar to Ocarina of Time. I think that they are improvements, but they both have their own faults. They're very. I almost lumped them together, but at least you have to know how to do
when you play.
You have to know how to do a certain thing, and I think that the idea is that they're trying to push for exploration. But I think that the exploration is handled better in Breath of the Wild because it is an open door where you can go wherever you want, whereas the other Zelda titles are very much, we left something for you, now spend a while trying to find it. Just the one thing in order to progress to find the next thing.
And, I had a thought about maybe this was something that Nintendo was going for, because I remember back in the day actually, having a much better experience with Ocarina of Time if I had the guidebook.
Right.
And the guide was something that you could have a friend over, and one of you is in the, reading the guide, and one of you, and you're working together to get through the adventure. And that was like something that I had done with a couple friends, and I remember the experience being so much better, not only because it was telling you what to do, but like you felt like it was like a secret map, and you were like unlocking the game together. And I think that maybe have been an intentional thing in the design by Nintendo. I'm just trying to give them some credit as to why it was that way, because and it was another way for them to make more dollars. But I think that that was who needs a guidebook now? You know what I mean? Like, I think Breath of the Wild may have had a guidebook, but no, I don't know if anyone got one.
Yeah, you can actually get the guidebook as a downloadable if you spend your gold coins on the My Nintendo website.
My goodness. You want to see a guidebook, just go to YouTube and watch videos. Right. That's what I did.
Exactly. So, and honestly, I think that if you are using a guidebook for Breath of the Wild, then I don't know what to tell you. I suppose some of the dungeons. You're not doing it right. I could see like if you need some help with some of the dungeon puzzles, because they're some of them are a little tricky. I remember having a little bit of frustration with the camel the first go around. But yeah, and I will admit I am not good at dungeons. A lot of people are like, these are too short in Breath of the Wild, and I kind of liked that they were short because they're already long for me. It takes me like 3 hours just to get through the one temple in Twilight Princess, which I played right before Breath of the Wild. Whereas it took me about an hour and a half to get through the DLC, the Champion's Ballad dungeon.
Sure.
Whereas I see some people like get through it like within 15 minutes, and I'm questioning like, how do you know where to go so fast? Like it's such a big space that with all these different doors. I don't know.
I played that one live, and it took me an hour. I was struggling big time with that one, but I mean, it's fun. It's kind of funny because I actually am on the opposite side of that coin. I really enjoy long dungeons, and I thought Twilight Princess had some of the best dungeons ever in the Zelda series. So I remember missing those.
I think I would like a dungeon that is designed like Breath of the Wild's, but is the length of a Twilight Princess one, because with Breath of the Wild, I felt like everything that was in the dungeon was something I had seen before, or I knew I could interact with it in some way, even if it was like a big metal contraption of some sort that I had never seen before. I still knew like, oh, that's a metal texture, so I know I can probably use magnesis on it in some way, shape, or form. And that's not to make it easier. It's just okay, I know like these are the assets I have, and this is what I can interact with and what I can't. Whereas a lot of the other Zelda dungeons, I have always felt that they always have something kind of unique in the room that I've never really seen before, that I don't really know how to work or how to interact with it. My mind goes towards the I think there's like a cannon or whatever in the mansion up on that snowy mountain.
Yep.
That I remember struggling trying to figure out how to use, because it was I want to say it was a sliding puzzle, or you had to shoot something in the mansion, but
you had to rotate it.
You had to rotate it, and I just remember being like, I don't know like what it is I'm supposed to be doing. Like I understand this thing moves, but I don't know. That's kind of my stance on that.
Yeah.
And I think every time I struggle with one of those puzzles, it's because like, oh, I'm so close. I just am not doing the one thing. So
we should have a whole podcast episode dedicated to talking about the dungeons.
Yeah, we should. I remember Wind Waker
I could go on and on for days.
Right. Wind Waker had a thing where if you used the grappling hook and you were swinging, you could stop and then you could climb up the rope and get on top of the ledge.
Yeah.
I was like, at no point was this ever like instructed or even said, hey, you can also do this. It's just like a thing that they ask you to do now. I don't know. I love Mario and Zelda games. You know, they are some of the best designed games, I suppose. But I do question moments like that where
I almost just want to encourage newcomers to those series to just not go back and play the old ones unless they really want to and try to figure it out. You know, who's going to stop them? But like those games have, you know, and the ones that we're talking about today, they have their flaws. And I think that I'm afraid that for some people who want to be fans of the series it might turn them off because, you know, not that they can't understand that it's an older game. It's just these days we have these expectations to have a good time. And I remember playing both 64 and Ocarina and not always enjoying it. You know, it takes work, I guess, sometimes. So
yeah, I don't know, it's difficult because I understand it. I like going back and playing games that I have fond memories with, but it's like watching an old movie that you're really fond of, I suppose, that you're not as excited to see again. I watched The Polar Express recently. I remember loving that as a kid, and I watched it again, and I was like, wow, this is dated. You know, they had motion capture, and the faces were all like, it looked like a chameleon trying to like escape the human body. It was weird. But that's a completely side story. You get my point.
I get it.
I like playing games that I enjoyed once upon a time, and I told you I can still go back and play Mario 64 and have a fun time with it. But I just don't like that they are the go-to, like, oh, this is one of the greatest games. You know, I wish that there's so many other games, and I don't like that those are always the top ones.
I 100% agree with you. And, you know, I don't know if people listening, if you agree or disagree, maybe we made some people angry, but...
that's whatever, you know, I mean...
Everyone's
if you're
entitled to their
angry,
opinions.
Yeah, I mean, no one's goal here is to make anyone angry. I think that it's just you're having a conversation, you're trying to
That's
share
right.
your thoughts and be real. I
Well,
still
I hope
acknowledge
everyone
that they're
enjoyed this discussion. I think it's one of those fascinating discussions because it's talking about highly regarded games of the past and how they do hold up now. And I myself personally can have a great experience playing both of these games, with minor frustrations. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely they were milestones, both of them.
Mhm.
In the whole gaming industry. I mean, Nintendo is in many ways the pioneer in my opinion. But yeah, so that's I think I'd like to leave it at that. Any other closing thoughts from you?
No. I think that it's like I said earlier. My thoughts on it are really it's just I think that they're masterpieces of their time.
Sure.
But they're not something I would go to right now and say, yeah, greatest of all time. I think that there are others that are greatest of all time now
Oh
that
yeah.
trump those. You know,
Yep. And I
I
think
would
it
even
is fair
I would
to
put Galaxy 2 above Mario
Okay, yeah.
64. Really, I mean, I know a lot of people don't like the gravity shtick, but I didn't like the crappy camera in the 64. So
It was a little wonky.
little bit, yeah. But that's all I have to say on that. I'm sure I'll think of something later and be like, oh,
Oh
why
yeah,
didn't
I'm
I?
sure we could
Yeah,
always talk about this.
right.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Thumbcast, and we'll see you guys in the next one.